Is Dropzone better than Defender? It's 1200 XL, episode 10. Hi, everybody. Welcome to 1200 XL. I'm John.
And I'm Aaron.
And today, Aaron, we're going to be talking about Dropzone.
Ooh.
Now, before we get into Dropzone, I think we should talk about the game that that gave it its most inspiration, and that game is, of course, Defender. Aaron, do you have any memories of playing Defender as a youth in the arcades?
They're brief memories, Boat. I walked up to Defender. I surveyed the 400-button control panel. I shakingly slipped it a quarter. I still looked at the control panel. I exploded 3 times, and then I walked away to go play something else because that game was hard. Too much going on. I never liked Arcade Defender. It's one of the few arcade games that was done better everywhere else, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the fact that they didn't go with a 4-way joystick, the fact that you have a stick that goes up and down, which is weird. I can't think of any other games except for maybe the Tapper on Tapper that just goes up and down. And then having the forward and reverse buttons, it's a hard game to wrap your mind around. I got a chance to play Defender over at our local barcade when we went over there a couple weeks back. And it was just as infuriating as I remember. So I'm glad that the home ports they cheesed it a little bit and made it a little bit easier for us. The first game I ever remember seeing in my life was the 2600 box of Defender. Do you remember the box art for that game, Aaron?
I will say I remember the game, but not the box art.
Yeah, so that what you see, and I've got it right over here. I'm looking at it. You see, it's like a cityscape. And then you see like an alien ship approaching, and then there's this woman, and it looks like she's starting to be beamed up or something. It's very evocative.
Is she turning her head like this? Because now I do. It's coming to me. Yes, I remember it.
That was the very first video game I ever saw in my life. I was about 5 years old, and I went over to my neighbor's house, and her parents had a 2600. So
those we've talked this before. Those old Atari cartridge boxes, the old box art was outstanding.
Mm-hmm.
They really. They gave your imagination something to stick in place of actual graphics whenever the game was playing, and I love that. Getting back to Defender for a moment, you're talking about the up and down joystick on it and all the buttons. I will say Defender was made by Williams, and Williams was famous for their arcade and pinball divisions. They were very innovative. And I always thought it was funny that the same outfit that made a game like Joust, where you had literally a left and right and a button, would also make Defender. And I always assumed that maybe they were trying to save money for all the buttons they put on Defender when they made Joust. They just put the one thing on there. But what a company. And one thing Defender had was awesome visuals and great sound. All Williams games were blessed with outstanding sound. There was no duds in the bunch. And a lot of those sounds came back and forth from their pinball machines, too. So you'll often be playing a game of pinball and hear video game sounds, and that's because the same folks were responsible for the same sound. Always kind of neat. Yeah,
absolutely. So Defender is the inspiration, but Dropzone is today's game. Let's talk a little bit about Dropzone. So Dropzone was developed by an outfit called Arena Graphics. Arena Graphics was really just Archer McLean. That was his company. Archer McLean, a pseudo legend in the a definite legend in the computing world. Less so of a legend in the console world, although he did make an appearance. World Karate Championship was his. Jimmy White's Snooker, Jimmy White's Cue Ball, a whole legion of Jimmy White inspired pool type games, and of course Dropzone and the SNES version of Dropzone, which was called what, Aaron?
Super Dropzone.
Aptly named. Yeah. Aptly named. Dropzone was originally published by US Gold, sort of an infamous publisher of some great releases and some not so great releases. I know I always think about US Gold Presents and the infamous Amiga port of Outrun. So they did some great stuff and they did some crap. So this game was released in 1984, which is pretty much, the final one of the last big years of the Atari 8-bit computer really ruling the roost. This is just a year or two previous to the launch of the ST. Of course, the 8-bits continued to exist for many years afterwards, but this was really the last big year where 8-bit computers were really at the top of the heap, and this was really the last big year that Atari was spending lots of cash on things like APX and really doing a lot for pushing their 8-bit computers. So this is sort of a fitting swan song to the whole 8-bit line because it is such a great game. This was released on a bunch of different platforms. The original Dropzone was released on, of course, the Atari 8-bit line. The C64 line, Game Boy got a version. I haven't played the Game Boy version. Game Gear, the Game Boy Color, and the NES. So it got a pretty wide release on a bunch of different contemporary systems at the time. So what is Dropzone, Aaron? I thought I would read to you from the manual just to set the stage, because every home computer game has got to have a ridiculous backstory, and this game is no different. Get ready.
All right, I'm ready.
It's the year 2085. Only a handful of people have survived the robot wars that rock the solar system. In a final desperate bid for survival, a tachyon-propelled star cruiser has been developed on Earth to transport survivors to a new star system. But the cruiser relies on rare Ionian crystals for its power, crystals which are only abundant on Jupiter's second moon, Io. It is your mission to escort the men and their precious crystals safely from the surface of Io to the Dropzone, where the landing pad is located. Does that get you fired up, man?
Listen, anything that's got tachyons in it, and so that sounds like a script for Next Generation right there. I think we've...
Yeah, it does. So Dropzone, what is this game? So Dropzone it's basically Defender, except you're the dude from Jetpack.
Yeah.
Well,
show's over.
You're rolling around town. You're blowing up aliens Defender style with your jetpack. Either these aliens are super tiny or you're the world's largest man.
Yeah.
Because you are 3 times the size of these alien crafts, okay? So what you do is you fly across a multi-screen landscape, just like Defender. You've got the radar below you. And you are trying to save the scientists that are on the planet, okay? For some reason, the scientists have scattered themselves all across the surface of this planet. And what you have to do is you have to pick them up one at a time and drop them off at you guessed it, the Dropzone. The Dropzone is like a little trap door that it's got a section that once you drop a guy off, it sort of lowers down and the guy goes into the pod where he's safe. So your job is to collect all of the guys and destroy all the enemies. And when you've done that, you've completed each wave. So now, Aaron, what were your thoughts when you fired this thing up for the first time?
Well, I consider myself, fairly well versed in the 8-bit, the Atari 8-bit scene back in the day. This is one I didn't remember playing on the Atari, to be honest with you. I played this a few months ago. It's been 6 months ago. We did Super Dropzone on ARG Presents, so I had an idea what it was like. But this game is very impressive looking on the 8-bit. In fact, this is one of the best looking and sounding games that I recall seeing. I mean, it's and the sense of speed, the radar. I mean, it's outstanding. It really is in terms of the look of it. The whole thing with the scientists is as I recall from the backstory, the scientists were spread over the planet because they were doing experiments when the aliens came, and they're in their emergency pods. That's why they don't look like scientists; they look like little atoms or something. And so you're trying to rescue them. So I guess they filled all that backstory in. But just my initial impressions were high, and also I should mention that when this game comes out, like when it comes on, it's got arcade level graphical representation of the name of the game. There's some demo scenes, extravaganzas going on. The Dropzone logos going up and down, and crazy stuff's going on with the scores. And
you also get a list of all the characters in the game. I mean, it's just like an arcade.
Yeah,
it's clear. I found an interview with Archer McLean, and he said that he created this game because he just wanted to make a game that was just as good as an arcade game. So he says he took inspiration from Scramble, Defender, Scargate, Galaxian, and many others, just basically all the big machines that were out at the time. And he said it took him 6 months to come up with something looking so good that it could be an arcade cabinet. And I mean, it really does. Now,
Yes.
does the game, once you start playing the game, does it have as many colors as an arcade machine in 1984? No. But this thing could roll with anything in the 1981-82 time period for sure.
You could have released this in 83, I think, and you could have gotten away with it. No, well, some people would have been like this. Listen, he may have said he took inspiration from Galaxian and Super Cobra, all these things, but having played those, this has none of the stuff that's in those in it.
I think he really wanted to say I stole everything from Defender, but he couldn't say that,
right.
So he
right.
he got a bunch of other games
but I mean,
in there too.
Listen, the enemies are way different than Defender. I'll give him that, and in a lot of ways, it's more graphically impressive than Defender ever was. With the way the land looks, like I said, it's a good looking game. ARG just got
and there's a wide variety of enemies in this game. There are these things called planters, and they drop androids, and so that when you hear that whistle, because you'll be playing and you'll hear a whistle, that's your signal that there's one of the scientists is in danger, and that's when you got to start heading for it. So that's a cool little thing. You've got the visual radar, but you also have the auditory radar, which is really cool too.
Yeah, it works well.
So once the android machine lands, it becomes this thing called a nemesite. Which and it turns basically into a homing missile. You've also got antimatter nodules that if all of your men are destroyed and you're just hanging out, this is sort of like in Defender when it's pure death mode, and you've got all of these things that are heading towards you. There are trailers, blunderstorms. They're kind of like cosmic storms, storm clouds and things. There's a wide variety of enemies in this game. It's impressive he was able to get so many different enemy types that all act differently. It's not just like the same enemy action that's pasted onto a different sprite. They all have kind of personalities of their own.
Yeah, and also I will say there's a few things that set it apart from Defender. There's that cloaking gimmick that you've got that sets it apart. And the enemies. Now, I will say this, Bo, and you may have a different opinion because I don't know if you grew up playing this or not, but this game, I could get past the first couple levels, with fairly usually. And then this game just goes into goodbye mode where I just get slaughtered. The enemies that start coming out are brutal.
I'll tell you what I believe the reason for this is.
All right.
Okay. This game, I believe, was designed to play with a joystick like the old Wicco command control, where you've got a stick and you've got the button on top. Because after the first, the first level is pretty simple, but after the second or third level, you have to use smart bombs. You have to use that cloaking device to get through it. I mean, it's just too hard not to. And if you're using a stick that requires you to have both hands on the stick, then it's just very, very awkward to activate your cloaking device to activate those smart bombs as soon as you need to.
Why don't you explain the smart bombs and the cloaking?
Well, the smart bomb is a smart bomb. It doesn't there's nothing earth shattering there. It works just like the smart bomb in Defender. The cloaking device runs on a meter, so you've got a limited amount of cloaking power. And when you cloak, you become invisible, but actually what he's done is he's turned your sprite black. So you can still see the outlines of it as you run along the surface of the planet. It's kind of a neat effect. But anyway, you use that as kind of a way for you to shield yourself from oncoming attacks. The enemies can't track you, if they're homing devices, and of course you'll just run through everything. So it's a pretty neat effect.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's definitely a departure from Defender. I think that what sets this game apart, aside from that, there are the different types of aliens you get. You name some of them, but to just describe them, there's this thing that looks like it's dropping a rain cloud on you. And you've got this thing that shoots these missiles, and these missiles are impossible to dodge. They go. I mean, what is that? They go and like they have blinds that come out. It's like a Tron light cycle's coming at you, and you can't get away from these things unless you shoot them. Those things suck. I hate those. If they get your scientists up in the air, they can turn those guys. There's a lot of stuff in this to tangle with, and since the stuff is so small, it's real easy just to run into it. And oh, by the way, they shoot, and their bullets are double small, so they're tough. And now it's a pain.
Now I'll tell you this. This is one of these games. and this is the first. This is a first, I believe, for this particular podcast that we've done. If you had a lot of trouble with this game, it might have been because you were playing on an NTSC machine rather than a PAL machine, because this never got an official North American release.
Oh, you might be right.
This was a British developed game for British Atari computers. The US Gold license was only for the UK and Europe. And it's actually funny. It was part of the interview that I found. So US Gold apparently told him that the game had left production after 18 months. They said, this thing isn't selling. We took it off the shelves. You're not getting any royalties. But what Archer did was he traveled a lot. He saw it for sale all over Europe. He saw it for sale in Australia. He saw somebody that I guess they'd done a US they'd done a version for the US market, but it looked real bad. It was because of, the NTSC versus PAL thing. And his contract with them, of course, prevented him from seeking out another publisher. So he actually took these guys to court and said, listen, this game is selling. It's on store shelves. I've seen it. Here are the pictures. These guys are not paying me royalties. And he won the court case. He used the money, Aaron, to buy a Ferrari, a 288 GTO.
Why does that not surprise me, given McLean? Well, good for him. Yeah. I wonder how many people that the U.S. Gold hosed like that. That probably happened a lot back in the day.
This is a story we hear a lot, coders getting hosed by the old publishers.
Getting back to what you said about, I put this on my actual, my actual XEGS over here, and it was fast. And I'm thinking maybe you're right. Maybe it was a PAL thing. I want to load this up on the Mister sometime.
Well, that's what I did. I loaded it up on the Mister, and it is easier to play when you run it in PAL.
It is super duper speedy. There's a couple things we would be remiss without mentioning, Boat, and I don't think we talked about it. One is, and this is a good and a bad thing, every time the Dropzone man dies, he blows up in a spectacular fireworks display, which is awesome to look at the first dozen or so times, but it takes so long for the to start that eventually you are tired of the fireworks display. You will go home, and also. In the true battle zone tradition, you've got little spewing volcanoes all over the landscape as well that you'll go through, which is neat. The effects in this are real tight. It does have, I wouldn't say they have Williams sound effects, but I mean we both know that the Atari can put out some decent sounds. I'd say this is at the top of the spectrum of good sounds. You mentioned the whistle, but just the shooting. There's a kind of a bassy shot in this. I like the sound effects. In fact, I liked pretty much everything about this except for the difficulty. I kind of wish, Boat, I was going to get your thoughts on this. I kind of wish that the Jumpman in this had actually had shields that you could. I mean, it would make this a lot less.
That's what the cloak
Well,
is.
I know, but I would rather not have to worry about the cloak and just have hit points, basically.
Oh, okay.
I think that would have differentiated this from Defender, just like cloaking did, without me having to pay attention, because there's too much else going on.
When you're dealing with the majority of sticks being two-handed sticks, it definitely makes more sense. Now, as part of this interview, he was asked, what was your favorite part of Dropzone, asking Archer. He says, squeezing the hardware in the Atari 800 to its limits and making it better than anything else available. And then he goes on to say, what was more amazing to me was the challenge of making it work on the less capable Commodore 64.
Yes, I knew this was coming. I guess we should go over the comparison, shouldn't we, Bode?
So the C64 is actually where I played this for the first time. And I was surprised that there was an Atari 8-bit version, and the Atari 8-bit version was the original version. This is the C64 version, so it looks not as good. It looks not as good. I can tell you that. The C64 color palette is on full display. Take your piece of gray and purple slime and stretch it over the screen, and that's what it looks like.
Burial.
You want to play the Atari version of this game, not the C64 version. Now, I do encourage everybody, though, to check out the NES version, because the NES version solves a lot of the problems of the original version of the game. It adds, of course, an extra button, which allows you to cloak And well, it's got the start and select button. So basically you can use, I think the select button is the smart bomb and the B button is the cloak. So you can use all the things. Of course, there's no keyboard on the NES. The graphics have been upgraded quite a bit. They still keep the original, your guy's still the same size and everything, but your guy's a little bit more detailed. The animation's a little bit better. So I was real surprised. The NES version, a European only release. So make sure you check that out because that's a comparison that's really, really cool to see.
I've played the C64 version, so I think it's okay. I think you're
it's okay.
I think it's a burial from you because the C64 doesn't have the palette you like, but I think it does a decent job. The Atari version's better. I mean, in my opinion, but I think the C64 version's okay. I've not played the NES version, but I did have a chance to play that Super Nintendo Super Dropzone, which basically is pretty much almost exactly the same game with some real crappy in-boss stuff like attached to it. And by the way, another European exclusive. So apparently, they just decided that no one in the States would like this game for some reason.
Yeah.
Or maybe the lawsuit.
It's a weird
involved.
thing because this was, I mean, obviously maybe for the Super Nintendo, I mean, the Super Dropzone is a pretty dated, I mean, even at the time, it was a dated concept for anybody. But I think Archer McLean's name carried a lot more jack. And they put Archer McLean's name on the box. So I can see why that was a European release. But Dropzone for the NES, I mean, that would have sold real well, I think. And it doesn't look out of place on the system at all.
I don't see why this shouldn't have been released in the U.S. for every system. Particularly, if I've got an Atari computer in '83, this should be here. There's no reason.
The only thing
it's
I
not
can
like
think
there's
of
so many other games that are crushing it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, and it's a native
the only thing
game.
I can think of is that there was just something weird with, of course, this was '84, so it was right at the end of when, people were really spending tons of, but again, maybe US Gold they saw the writing on the wall and they saw what was going on. People were starting to shift away from the 8-bits because even in '84 was like stuff fell off a cliff. That was what we heard when we talked to the guy that did Getaway.
Yeah.
He said after '84, just nobody was interested in 8-bit stuff anymore in the States versus in Europe and in the UK, there was still another, 6 or 7 years of people being all in on the 8-bit system.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. So, but I think this is I will reevaluate after I play this on a PAL machine. But I mean, I like it, but too fast. And the explosions may take too long in between men. Those are my two biggest complaints.
Yeah. All right, well, that's going to do it for this episode of 1200 XL. If you'd like to support the show, you're welcome to visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/1200XL. And next month, Aaron will be back with another episode. Anyway, we appreciate you listening. And if you want to watch us live, twitch.tv/Amigos Retro Gaming. We always tape live. You can join the fine folks in the chat that have watched us. So we'll see you guys next month for another edition of 1200 XL. Until then, make sure you play
your Atari today.